I know. Evening all. Welcome to the 33rd chat show.
Still the longest running chat show in Paisley, Gary. It's amazing.
How about that? And it's oozing cultural content, Andy.
Well, it was oozing something last week, Gary.
I had a hangover last week, Andy, and I'd one wee taste of that stuff.
Well, listen, it was great. It was a great programme last week and another great programme tonight. But, Gary, I was just, I'm moving my seat here and it wasn't quite going into where I wanted to go. And I don't know if it's you, but I'm full of these boxes right now. Have you been doing a spot of this, Gary?
No.
Have you been doing any shopping for Mrs. K, or have you been out and about into Paisley town centre?
Nothing.
Nothing at all, Gary. Is Christmas scrubbed in your house?
Just another day, Andy.
Just another day, Gary. Well, maybe the festive.
Honestly.
Are you taking a buy on Christmas, Gary?
Honestly, it's just another day. It's commercial claptrap. I'm going to big it up this year, though. I'm going to enjoy it this year because every day is a prisoner in this current climate. We'll be putting our stuff up at the weekend. I'm going to go down to the recycling and dig out my Christmas jumper that I threw out about a month ago and get it back.
I quite like Christmas. I'm looking forward to it, Gary. We're well into December, 9th of December now, Gary. And Christmas isn't that far away, but it's been chock-a-block with deliveries. That seems to be the new thing.
Is that a surprise, that block, Sandy?
No, it's just getting in my way, Gary. I'll need to sort it. But I'm
trying my best to keep it simple this year. It's keep it nice and simple. Celebrate on the day. Tune in at 3 o'clock for the Queen.
Did I tell you about the time in 1999, Gary?
What happened? Was that when you met the Queen?
Me and the Queen.
You and the Queen, eh?
My poor mammy nearly choked on her Brussels sprouts. And for anyone that's listening, folk, if you want to see Andy with hair, all you need to do is go onto YouTube, type in, don't do it now, wait until the show's over, but go onto YouTube, type in Queen's Christmas Speech 1999. It was the last one of the old millennium. And you can watch it and watch out to see if you can see Andy with hair.
You met her up Toledo, though, didn't you? And she's never forgot you.
Oh, well, that was definitely a queen. But I'm not sure if it was.
I know.
Dearie be. So, but anyway, Gary, I was just getting, this box was getting in my way, just in case you were wondering why I was shuffling in my seat. But
Andy, I wasn't.
Oh, you won there. Week 33, Gary. It's it's been quite something. And last week was a great show, but there's been some good news that's followed up from last week. Is there not, Gary?
Yeah, well, first international show last week when Julia was on talking about the Paisley witch trial, and our screenplay is, I think it's going to be brilliant. A film based around a Paisley story, and she announced last week that she wants to give it back to the community. And of course, me and you are in it, Andy, already. I mean, we got a buy.
Absolutely.
She's winning all sorts of plaudits and awards and shortlist for this and shortlist for that. And she announced she's in the finals of the British horror movie film category or screenplay category. There you
British Horror Film Festival, the Paisley Witch Trial. And she is a machine on social media. She's been really, really promoting out what she's been doing with the Paisley Witch Trial. And she's been getting an awful lot of traction with it. And this story, which is obviously set in and around the time of the Paisley Witch Trials, is getting great traction. And it's a film in the making. And of course, there's only one place to film it, folks. So this is definitely one to watch. This is quite exciting. And it's going to be a horror film festival, a horror film, obviously. So yeah, it's going to be great.
But one of the principles that Julia has running through everything she's doing with this film is to name them and to have their name known,
Yep.
so that they're pardoned. There's actually a witches thing going on. You go onto our Twitter and you'll find it somewhere.
Absolutely.
There's a pardon the witches, and there's 4,000 souls in the dim and distant past that were tried and convicted as witches, and there's a campaign in Julia's movie and screenplay about Paisley witch trial as part of that. It's great to hear from all. Yeah. We hope she was tuning in from New York last week, and we get a real surprise when she was sitting in Florida.
She was in Florida, but talking of our international audience, Gary, Elizabeth
again, or is it afternoon there, Elizabeth?
Well, I guess it'll be 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours, so it's kind of 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Great. Elizabeth is one of our regulars in Chicago. Yeah. We've got Paisley.
Andy.
We've got the whole of Paisley tuning in, Gary.
Oh, hi. Hello, the whole of Paisley. Good to see you, Paisley.
Good to see you. Councillor Devine's in.
Evening, Eddie. Still no heard from her, Eddie. You said you were on the case.
Oh, Eddie was going to chap somebody's door, wasn't he?
He was going to chap somebody's door. Imagine getting your door chapped and Eddie stood in there.
Oh, I know. Jeez. That's a horror movie in its own right, is it not?
Well, I never said that. You said that.
Where's the me? 10 past 2 in Chicago. 10 past 2. Good stuff. So, Gary, have you had a busy week? What have you been up to?
I have had a busy week with all sorts of things going on, Andy. I'm knee deep in work.
Yeah.
And I'm knee deep in other stuff. It's good to be busy, Andy. Are you busy?
Chock-a-block, because I'm right. We've also got another tradition in our house, and I don't know if anyone else is similar to this, but in the run-up to Christmas, we've got to take on a decorating challenge.
Oh, aye.
So I wouldn't know what Christmas really smells like, because my house always smells of gloss or emulsion paint.
Oh, it's your own house. You don't just chap it around.
I don't just chap the neighbours and ask them if they want their hall done. But we always decorate. So right now I'm painting the hall, and I've got a carpet getting fitted in a few days before Christmas. So that's my big focus, on getting the rest of the hall painted. So I'm busy during the day with work, and then at night time I've got the paintbrush out, Gary. Apart from tonight.
Good luck with that, Andy. I hope you make it till the 23rd of December at least.
Aye, we'll get there. It'll be lovely when it's done. I'll enjoy putting my feet up over the festive period. But and there's been a few things catching your eye. Obviously, the Paisley witch trial was one of them, Gary. You had a couple other things.
What else has caught my eye, Andy? I can't remember what caught my eye in it.
Well, this is what you told me caught your eye earlier on, Gary.
Oh, aye. Of course, yes. That caught my eye. And that's a consistent message coming out from St Mirren Football Club Charitable Foundation in partnership with the Star Project. That they need our help. So if you can help, get onto the Star Project on Facebook and Twitter. Get onto SMFC Charitable Foundation on Facebook and Twitter. Or grab a pile of this stuff and email foundation@stmirren.com.
And they'll happily receive all your donations. Well, one thing caught my eye in connection to the St Mirren Charitable Foundation as well. And hopefully, if I click the right buttons, I'll be able to share what caught my eye. And let me just do that. And it's this, Gary.
Yeah, I've seen that.
They're having a competition for a new logo.
Yeah.
And I'll just zoom that in, hopefully, and that goes to where I want it to go to. No,
I was torn, Andy, and what one to vote for. I really was torn.
Well, not that I want to sway anyone's opinion here, but I really like this red emblem that is actually, you get it on the main St Mirren badge. So the fact that they've taken that out and they've made that either the centerpiece of A or the centerpiece of D, I really like. I think that's really clever. This one here feels too much like, just the St Mirren badge as it is. This is Paisley, doesn't say too much about St Mirren, but pulling that wee icon out, Gary, and making that the basis, I really liked. So that was pretty smart. So, folks, if you're interested in St Mirren Charitable Foundation, get onto their Facebook page, and you can vote on their new logo. And you have until Friday.
Andy, what one did you go for?
I think I'm going to go with A.
Oh well.
I'm assuming that's not the one you went for, Gary.
No, I think if with my designers, I'd have went for A or D.
A or D. I'm torn between A or D. Either one I'm happy with.
But I went for C because that's the one that's going to win.
Well, I think A's going to win. And you're not a designer, Gary. You're an engineer. Come on.
No, Andy, B would have won if they'd have done away with those squirrely things.
Or the kind of Paisley patterns. Yeah.
Keep the Paisley pattern things in the middle.
Aye.
That would have been slightly different. But C's going to win. There's Paul Stewart, just to be different. D's going to win. Andy's get A.
I'm going for A. Definitely A for me. So whilst I'm on my share screen, Gary, another thing caught my eye, and it's topical because we're going to be talking about Paisley's historical buildings tonight. Yeah. We've got two smashing guests coming up that know everything about the buildings in Paisley, the listed buildings that we have, the ones under threat. But this one caught my eye was, imagine what it'd be like to see Paisley in the 1900s, Gary. Imagine that you could go back over 120 years. Yeah. Well, actually, this guy's done it, right? Don't know if you've caught any of this.
I've seen that.
It's a guy, well, he's getting a bit of traction. It was on Facebook again, Gary.
Yeah.
And it's a guy called, I think his name is Ian Young.
Yeah.
He's a computer graphic wizard.
Yep.
And what he has done is he has rebuilt Paisley as it was in the 1900s. So you can see there, that's the old jail that he's built there. Yeah. Let me just try and zoom that back out again. So that's the jail. And that's it onto the cart. You scroll down, and then I thought this was brilliant because we often talk about the cavern or the terrace tavern, I think it was called. And that's it down there on the white, Gary. So
there's a video of that, Andy. Have you seen the video?
There is a video. I was going to say you can check that out, but I think this is absolutely smashing. There's Ian and his computer doing what he does, and Paisley in 1900. Wouldn't it look absolutely smashing to try and get back to that kind of style where there wasn't a piazza, Gary? Not that that's a recurring theme on this.
What's that under the text?
Under the text?
Yeah, just under the text, that shiny bit.
Ah, yes, indeed. The river cart.
Was that the river?
Aye.
I thought it was the spirit of Paisley's future.
I knew where you were going with that one, Gary. I knew where you were going.
Boom, straight in.
Straight in, Gary. So what else caught your eye this week? There was another wee thing before we get on with our guests.
There was. Can't mind what it is, isn't it?
It was this one.
Oh, yeah. Saturday, light up Renfrewshire. Watch on Facebook, 7 p.m. We've got it on our social media already. So if you click on Paisley Is, or the Bungalow, or Brick Lane Media, or Renfrewshire Council, or Paisley Community Trust, or paisley.org, anywhere that's got Paisley stuff going on, 7 p.m. on Saturday, there'll be a cracking highlight of the whole of Renfrewshire's Christmas lights. I'm looking forward to that one, Andy.
That should be good, Gary. You'll be able to sit with a wee cup of tea and a mince pie and just, enjoy watching the Paisley and the Renfrewshire lights. That'll be good.
I've never liked mince pies.
I'm not a fan of mince pies either, to be quite honest.
I got one when I was an apprentice, and they went, we get mince pies for you boys. Oh, great, a mince pie. Oh, thanks very much. Any gravy or anything like that? And it's all raisins. What are you doing?
Exactly. I mean, I'm the exact same as you, Gary. A mince pie. Yeah. What's inside it? No mince.
That is mince.
Well, exactly.
That's totally mince.
Raisins nonsense. Don't want any of that. I want to
raisins. I don't miss that.
Anyway, I like Madeira cake. That's my festive cake.
What about the cheap one? You know, any cheap ones? No, I'll have the Madeira one.
Jokes are getting worse in this programme, Gary.
Well, I know it's all my fault.
I think what we should do before any more bad jokes happen is we should. I think we should talk about our guests and get them onto the programme, Gary. Get them onto the show.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. So, folks, we've got a subject that I'm sure will be really popular, because anytime we're on Facebook, when you talk about the old buildings in Paisley town centre, particularly the ones that you see going to rack and ruin, those listed buildings that you see trees growing out them or the windows smashed on them or whatever, everybody's got something to say about them. They're our, we cherish them in the town, but we actually don't really look after them very well. And there's lots of really good reasons that they are in the state that they're in. So two folk that know everything about the listed buildings that we've got and the historical buildings that we have in the town that are perhaps under threat are our next two guests. So for our historical building special, we're going to bring on Frank McPherson and Cameron Swanson.
Hey, cool.
Good evening to the both of you.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening.
Good evening.
So thanks so much for joining us. Frank, we understand that you're joining us from Paisley, and Cameron, you're not in the town right now, but you are a Paisley resident.
No, I'm at the moment I'm in Telford on a holiday. I'm not on holiday, right enough. Yeah. So I'm on the hotspot on my phone, and I'm going to get kicked out of here at 9 o'clock. So.
Oh well, listen, we'll better crack on with the show, and because we'll get lots to talk about, and both of you have been fantastic at sending through some pictures. And Telford, how does that compare to Paisley, Cameron?
Oh, it doesn't at all.
Cameron, where is Telford?
It's down south.
Oh, there you go, nailed it.
Aye, down south of Paisley. Down that way.
We get about in this show.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Near Birmingham.
Near Birmingham. Well, listen, Frank, you've been busy. I mean, obviously, we've all been going through COVID right now. But you've been busy, Frank, during this period of time, putting your photography skills to good use. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Frank, and what you've been up to over the COVID period?
Yeah. Hi there, everyone. I took up photography about 10 years ago when I turned 50. So you can guess what I'm going to be now. So I started to get a bit more serious. We've been in Paisley now for 25 years. All through this sort of period of lockdown, I started to part of my exercise routine was to do a circuit of Paisley.
Yep.
I also decided in March that I would take early retirement from printing packaging. Used to work in a company that made the packaging for the whisky industry. So I took the view that part of my role was in health and safety, that I didn't really want to be dealing with everyone's COVID issues on site, and I took the opportunity of leaving about a year or so early.
Yeah.
So one of the things I decided I was going to do as part of my retirement was to start looking at the buildings of Paisley. As I'd done some of my walks, I think one of the first buildings I saw on my routes where I went slightly off kilter, I used to walk around the square, up to Nielsen Road, Morrison's, and do a square down Nielsen Road, through the town, and then back up to Hawkhead that way. So it's about a 5-mile circuit, and to try and increase that, I went a wee bit off kilter.
Aye.
And one of the first buildings I saw, and I wanted to find a bit more about it, was on Espadere Street, and it was an old building. It's a snooker hall just now, or I'm sure it probably still is. I just liked the idea of the building and the structure of it. So I went home and I decided to have a wee look at what was there. I'm quite aware that Paisley's got a lot of historical buildings and listed buildings. I've always been told or read that Paisley has the highest concentration of listed buildings in Scotland. I debate that because I've been looking at Glasgow recently, and there's probably more there. I don't know if it's the concentration per area in the square mile. But anyway, I sort of came back, looked up the building in Espadere Street, and found this Historic Environment Scotland website that basically catalogues all the A, B, and C listed buildings throughout Scotland, and you get a map on that, and you get a listing for that. You pick on the listing, and you can see what it's been used for.
Yeah.
So I decided that as part of my retirement, to keep me busy when I retired in June, which was my original plan, that I would start photographing and cataloguing all the buildings that I've been taking over the years, and look at the A-listed and B-listed buildings. There's something like 22 A-listed buildings and approximately 200 B-listed buildings in the town. Some of them aren't there anymore, but
Frank, I know that building.
Yeah.
In Stock Street, as I know it, in the corner of Espadere Street, it was old Captain Dye Works. I knew it as the Dye Works anyway, and they turned it into a snooker hall. Is that right, or does it go further back?
It goes further back. It's right back to being, I think it was originally a bathhouse for going and doing your laundry, and when there wasn't communal or household washing facilities, I think they went back, it went back as far as that. So I don't have the actual dates of the buildings for any of the ones I've done. My whole impetus was to really look and see if I could catalogue the actual buildings photographically, to have a look at that. On my walks, when you started coming through the first lockdown, when we went into the serious lockdown in March, the opportunity was too good to miss because the streets were dead. There was hardly any cars about, and I actually started to catalogue a lot of the buildings on my daily walks. And I was going my walks to try and catch the ones in and out of the outskirts of the town, etc., but still to keep within the constraints of the allowances for the walking, etc.
So you've produced this book, Frank. Now this show gets broadcast on Paisley FM tomorrow night, so Thursday night. So for some of the pictures that we're going to be showing, that audience unfortunately will not be able to see some of the amazing pictures that have been taken. So we'll do our very best to describe what we see on screen. But this is a picture of the book that you've actually created, Frank, and it's listed buildings of Paisley. A compilation of A and B listed buildings or structures within the Paisley parish boundary. And I'm just going to share some of the inside pictures before we dig into some of the details. But these are some of the kind of imagery that you capture. So it's not just one picture of the mill, for example, it's multiple pictures, and you've broke that down and laid them out in such a brilliant style. And I'm guessing the book is quite sizable. This looks like it's a pretty large kind of coffee table style book, Frank.
Yes, it is. It's a 14-inch by 10-inch book. That's the actual book there itself. So,
oh wow!
So it's a sizable book, and it's. I didn't want to go any bigger than that because the idea was so it could be like a coffee table type of thing. It was really done for my own benefit, as much as anything. I've done a book a year for the last 4 or 5 years. I've just of the photographs I've taken throughout the year, but not getting very far. I was more restricted to Paisley views and Glasgow views, maybe. This year, or Arran, because I've got my mother-in-law lives in Arran, so that's my two sort of main points of photography this year have been Arran and Paisley.
Frank, you see the title there saying Paisley Parish.
Yes.
I've not seen that much in anything that comes up in and around Paisley, apart from maybe some historical birth certificate stuff that you maybe do some genealogy in the Paisley Parish. What made you focus on that as an area? And
Paisley Parish is probably Greater Paisley, so it goes right down to the Ralston Sports Pavilion, which is an A-listed building. That's the sort of Art Deco style kind of building. And my problem was I was starting to look at it and you could see you had Levendale was in there and you think, well, where does Levendale come in? And when I started to look at the stuff within the Historic Environment Scotland portal, they would either put it as Paisley Parish or Paisley, I think it's Paisley Central. I'm not sure what the other definition was, but that was more the centralised element of Paisley itself. So the idea of that was to get the greater sort of width or borders of the town. It comes right up to, it picks out Dyke Bar Hospital. So I've got about a page and a half of Dyke Bar. I've got about a page and a half of Hawkhead Hospital, albeit it's now predominantly
housing now, isn't it?
And been rebuilt or refurbished.
Well, we're going to take a look at some of the pictures in a moment, but I'm keen to bring Cameron in here, because Cameron, you know, this is very much a kind of key subject that you're very interested on. And you actually sent us through an image earlier on about the number of listed buildings within Paisley. They're denoted on the map there in the blue and the pink dots. But can you tell us a little bit about the sort of numbers of listed A and B listed buildings within the town, and maybe some of the jewels in the crown there, Cameron?
Yeah, no problem at all. I mean, I think Frank said rightly, there's about 22 A-listed buildings in the town centre. I think across Renfrewshire in total there's about 32 A-listed and 560 odd B-listed, I think, in total. So it's a significant number, but obviously the majority of them are in the town centre. And for myself, I've recently moved into a new flat just in March, which is good timing for lockdown and everything. So for me, like, actually, very much like Frank, like, lockdown provided a great opportunity just to kind of get out and see the town. And like my daily walk, I would walk by all the buildings and sort of see the fantastic buildings are there, but also the buildings that, like you say, are in like a sort of dire need of repair and are in a sort of poor state at the moment.
And you don't even need to walk far, Cameron. There's one in particular that really annoys me among a long list, and it's the one in the corner of St Mirren Bray in the High Street.
Yeah, that's quite an unfortunate one, just because of where it's situated. I'm not really sure what the situation of that building is, but it appears the upper floors have been empty for almost 20 years. There was, in fact, it was somewhat occupied at the start of this year because there's a cannabis farm in it. So that's the only people that have been in the upper floors for a while. But that building's changed use numerous times. It's been a bank most of its life, and the upper at that point would have been the bank offices for the bank manager, as well as a residential space from the who's doing business late. So that is unfortunate, that building, but I'm not too sure what the situation is there.
Yeah. And Frank, you sent us through a number of kind of pictures, and obviously we saw the snooker halls, which we get some great comments coming in. It was a wash house apparently from Brian, so there we go. Jane has had a picture of her and Steve Davis in there when she lived in. So Jane, we need to post that one up. We need to get a look at it. But some of the
Davis's at one time, Andy, or something like that.
What's that?
I think it was called Davis's.
Davis's.
He must have opened it.
Aye,
it was a snooker hall.
Maybe put a license in on it, but there's a few pictures. I mean, this particular one of the Mills, Frank, is just an absolutely stunning image. That on the screen there, it doesn't really do it justice, unfortunately. But you've managed to capture the cart when it's nice and still, and you've got a really nice symmetrical reflection going on there.
Yeah, it's one of it's probably, I think, what you're talking about earlier, the jewels of the crown. I think for me, that's probably one of my favourites. Between that, one of the ones I've photographed the most over the years. I've seen it going from probably in the 80s when it was almost derelict, and been recovered. I'm fortunate that I've got a niece that lives in there now, so I've occasionally been allowed up to go and see the fireworks going off as well from there. But,
and
it's a beautiful
into that image.
Yeah.
That's
that
amazing.
one's taken from the Sockle. Is it Sockle Hill?
Saucil Hill.
Saucil Hill. That was probably one of the few that I got before the smoke suddenly enveloped the whole building. I would quite like to get a photograph of that building with every window lit. But you'd almost have to coordinate that, I think. So that'd be a bit difficult. It's one of my favourite buildings in the town.
I think we should try and coordinate pixels on there.
Oh, right, okay, get so many different lights on in different houses.
I was driving by it the other day and I seen the odd light on the mill in the distance, and a kind of half light, a kind of smouldery half light, and it really caught my eye.
Yeah,
it was just stunning.
It's a fantastic building. I remember it, you know, Frank, you mentioned when it was near derelict. I remember it when it was empty, and you know, I think it had a renovation. Cameron, sorry, you were saying that it was an £11 million that Persimmon Homes put into it to convert it.
So I think this is probably, I mean, Renfrewshire's biggest success story in terms of taking a building from a state of, you know, complete dereliction to, like, you know, high quality flats, like luxury flats. So it was an £11 million investment, and Renfrewshire Council get a lot of stick a lot of the time for, you know, the buildings in the town. And what people don't understand is, like, or what they forget is the success as well. So you know, that is a real story of success. They managed to secure funding from the Prince's Foundation, and that paid for the restoration, and it you know, it allowed it to be converted into flats. And they had that sort of agreement with Morrison's to develop there as well. And you know, the Morrison's building that's there is somewhat in keeping with the mills themselves. Unfortunately, you've got just recently the mill beside Morrison's, which was demolished, which the old what was Blackhall House. That was a very frustrating one, because it was supposedly the oldest purpose silk mill in Scotland, and unfortunately, start of last year, it was demolished after much objection. The council actually refused its demolition, but that was overturned by the Scottish government.
Yeah, and we've still got, I mean, there's you know, obviously with Paisley and Renfrewshire being so immersed in the mills over the years, there's been some brilliant pictures. I think this one's now gone, isn't it? Fergusley Mills. Yes,
this is Fergusley Spinning Mill #1. I think it's probably Paisley's greatest loss. You can imagine if that had been turned into flats, it'd be absolutely fantastic. This is actually the end of the building, the far end of it. So you don't see the full length of the building, but that building is about 3 times as long as you can see there. So it was just very near to where the half-timer school was. So currently around the sort of moorings around there. And that whole area was obviously taken over and totally flattened. There were some buildings that were kept, like the counting houses that were there, and some of the small office buildings. But the majority of it is unfortunately gone.
And
tragedy, actually, Canon.
Absolute tragedy. I mean, it could have been brilliant. And Frank, you managed to capture this building, which I actually know this building quite well, because we knew people who used to stay in one of the flats in there. But tell us a little bit about that building, Frank.
Well, it's probably, having lived in Paisley for 25 years, I wasn't really aware of these, because they're kind of tucked away in the middle of Fergusley, and there's about 3 or 4. That's one of the gatehouse buildings, I think. That and there's a small bridge that goes over. From there, the other gatehouse is open at the other end of the site. I think there's only about 3 or 4 buildings that I've tabulated that are still recorded in there. There's the counting house, the stables are part and parcel, which are on the main road. And I think some of the workers' houses are still there. So it's opened my eyes to the town and to some of the beautiful buildings that are there. And I would agree that I think if some of the mill buildings had been kept, they would be stunning conversions now.
I mean, obviously, it's a difficult situation.
I think it was the one that has been demolished fairly recently.
Come on, in your experience and what you've been digging through in the past few years, how easy is it to demolish a building like that? And as part of the process?
It's not easy. I mean, typically, like, you know, these buildings are lying empty for sort of a period of around 20 years. And I mean, throughout that time, you know, at the start of that time, the buildings are in perfect condition. You know, there's nothing wrong with them. But as soon as they're boarded up, they kind of attract, like, the wrong sort of people. You know, people start breaking into them, damaging them inside. The value then depreciates. Some of them end up on fire. Quite a lot end up in fire, in fact. which tends to be the fate of most of them. And then, once you're at that stage, once the roof is off, there's not a huge amount that can be done. But saying that, there have been examples in the past in Paisley where even a building that's totally lost its roof and has been, ended up in a burnt out shell has been restored. There's a building hidden away in the north side of the town, just on, I think it's New Snedden Street, is the Koh-i-Noor restaurant. That in the 70s went on fire, and it was completely gutted. Like, it ended up just a shell, but that was lovingly restored in the 90s, and you wouldn't know that it was ever in the state that it was in.
Yeah,
and of course,
absolutely.
You've got the TA house now as well, which that you can see the plans that are there for that. That was really, that's really what did it for me. That's why I sort of started getting a bit more involved in this, because it was my first week that I'd moved into my flat in Townhead Terrace, and I was fixing my washing machine because it was into the kitchen. I happened to look out the window. I saw like a hole of smoke, and I was like, oh no, what's this? So I went over to the window, and the building was up in flames. And this was just before the fire brigade arrived. So early stages, and at that point, I could see it was gone. And that was pretty horrific to see. So for me, that's really what sort of kick-started a lot of this, because I was just fed up of seeing the same repeat pattern over and over again. Building becoming empty, left abandoned for years, ended up in flames, and then eventually demolished.
Yeah, and Frank, this next one is probably one that's not in your book, but most people will remember it fondly. It was the half-timers school at one point. It was the Ciba social club. Then it was a nightclub for a number of years, and I mean, it's just another fantastic architectural gem for the town. But very sadly, and maliciously, it was set on fire and destroyed.
That's a pile of bricks now, Andy. I drove by that today. It's a pile of bricks, and it's tragic. I remember it well as the Cotton Club. In fact, I don't remember it that well, actually, as a Cotton Club. But I was in it a lot, if you know what I mean.
Aye. But we'll come on to maybe some of the reasons in a minute why these buildings are left to go to ruin, and maybe what the council can do, maybe what the communities can do, because I think everybody would be really keen to see what can be done to save these places. But Frank, you sent us through a picture which I didn't recognise this as Paisley at all. I have no idea what this building is. So tell us a bit about that one, because that looks stunning.
Yeah, well, that building is on Mansion House Road. It's just across, straight across from Paisley Grammar. So you go across Paisley Grammar and up into sort of the streets round about there. And there's some stunning buildings there. Not a lot of them are actually listed as such, but there's some stunning architecture within that whole area. And this is one that used to be an outbuilding for the main house that's further round the street, and it's obviously been converted into. It looks like it's either an addendum to somebody else's house or an actual standalone wee unit as well. But it's been well done. I think in the way they've gone about it, it's a beautiful. It's just it just sort of hits you.
Well, it looks like the poshest garage in the world.
Yeah, well, that's what it was. I think it was originally a stables. Yeah, it was a stable house for the house along there. It's I can't remember the name of the main house now off the top of my head. But it's a beautiful. There's just taking and part of what Carmen's saying. There's just walking about the town, finding wee places to go, and when you start looking at the map with all these pins on them, you don't get a view of what the building's like. You get an explanation of what it was, and usually it starts with Ashlar or something, and it's a coach garage.
There we go. Always rely on Roddy with the information. Thank you, Roddy.
Yeah. It's brilliant to be able to stumble across the wee buildings like that, and you drive down there. And you drive. Is that the one you can go up and go round the corner at the end, and it's up top right, and then you go round and you're back out on Glasgow Road again?
Yeah, you do a sort of full circuit, and in there's houses that look as if they've probably been council houses at one point. I'm not quite sure. They're not in any of the listings that I've seen so far. But there's some stunning architecture around about there, and really, really, I really enjoy doing it. And one of the things I did was
Andy. Sorry, Frank.
Sorry for that, Frank. I'm just looking.
Yeah.
The service in the kitchen's awfully bad tonight. Usually I get my cup of tea about kind of 8:05, Frank. That's 20 to 9, and that's me just getting my cup of tea. What's worse, I had to text down for it. Terrible. the kitchen staff are getting sacked. They're obviously watching you guys on the Paisley Community Chat Show.
I was going to say as well, Frank, Norma's commented there, a building just at the bottom of that road, the old eye infirmary. See if you take your time and walk up that road and just look to the left and look to the right. The buildings are stunning.
Yes, they are. I think most of the structures up there are B-listed that I've got in my book.
Right.
I've tried to. My book's been formulated in sort of kind of areas where I can. I've kind of, as you said, there's some pages where I've gone to town. I think for the particularly the Abbey, the Town Hall, Coates Memorial, and the mill, Anchor Mill. They're stunning structures, and they really present themselves very well in all different kind of lights throughout the year. So
there's a few buildings, Frank, that a lot of people touch on in Paisley that they want to see something done with. So the TA, Cameron mentioned the TA, and it's great to know that that's been acquired. A private developer is developing student accommodation on it, so it's better that than anything else. It'll be much needed as Paisley continues to grow as a university town. The other one was Coates, and we've talked about Coates Memorial Church, and this was a picture Cameron sent through earlier on of that building in its heyday. All the trees in the background, etc. I walk past that building and I still just look up and absolutely marvel at it. We are so lucky to have that building in our town. It's an architectural masterpiece.
Aren't we just, Andy? Aren't we just? I must have about 100 copies of the same image of that. You walk by it and you think, I'm taking a picture of that.
It's absolutely amazing. So the TA building, Coates building, but the third building that everybody is really concerned about in the town, and if I can get the right image up, it's this one. Cameron,
that's the old hospital, Andy.
Yeah, the old RAI. Cameron, tell us a bit about the RAI, because I know that this is a subject very close to your heart, because it currently looks kind of like this right now.
Yeah, that's tragic.
The RAI really is a tragic situation. I mean, it was obviously the infirmary up until the 80s, and then it closed down. Part of it at that point became a nursing home, and part of it was converted into flats. So the way the building is, it's a sort of E plan. So one of the branches of that E has been developed. So it's the side on Nielsen Road, is it? Has been developed. And you've got the centre wing and the end wing, which unfortunately are laying derelict. So they've been empty since 2006, and ever since then, you can see the building's gone into quite a terrible state. So there's various reasons for that. Up until around 2012, the building was actually in a fairly good condition. In 2012, the council made a big effort to try and market the building and sell it on. They had, at the time, they were running what were called developer days, which were a sort of really good initiative. They got developers in to sort of identify buildings at risk, buildings they thought were prime for development, and they would develop a brief for them and then try and market them to developers. But just shortly after that, it was sold at auction in London, and a guy in London picked it up for 350 grand. And since then, it's just fallen into a terrible state.
£350,000. So they bought the old RAI, which a lot of folk are saying, it would make a fantastic hotel and conference centre. It would be a fabulous hotel. It needs to be sorted and not pulled down. But since that gentleman spent 350 £350,000 to acquire it, which, let's be honest, it will need an awful lot of work, but £350,000 is not a huge amount of money. And it's been allowed to fall into disrepair. And I guess everybody will say, well, why is that allowed to happen? What can the council do? What can the Scottish Government do? What are we empowered to do, Cameron, to stop that building from turning into another, institute, that was set on fire and razed to the ground? What can we do with the RAI? We can't let that go downhill.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, as individuals, there's not a huge amount we can do. Buildings like these, especially buildings as big as these, are notoriously very difficult to not get anything done about. Because, I mean, the money involved to get something like that restored is astronomical. So without any sort of funding, it might not be viable. I mean, the guy that owns the place, he applied for planning permission in 2014, which lapsed in 2017, and that planning permission would have allowed him to convert it into 35 flats with, I think, approximately 25 new build flats. Space on the site. So that you think that converting the 60 flats would be economically viable, but he decided to sit on it. I don't know if his intentions are just to kind of wait until it gets to a point where it has to be pulled down, and then sell on the land, because the reality is the land is probably more valuable than the building, and that's the problem with a lot of these situations. But in terms of what we can do, there's from a council point of view, their hands are fairly tied. The responsibility kind of lies with the owner ultimately. There are some things the council can do. So they have served some notices in the past. One of them was an environmental notice, which the owner of the building was fined £400 and told to clean up the site, which he did. But that's not going to force them to develop. There are some other routes the council can take, but they're quite often reluctant within these routes. So the first stage might be like an urgent works notice, which would require the owner to repair anything which is causing damage to the building that they deem as urgent. There's other things like repairs notices, which they can provide a repair schedule, and that way the owner is obliged by law to carry out work. Otherwise, the council can take further action. Further action beyond that could be either fines or compulsory purchase. But for a building like this, there's absolutely no chance the council are going to compulsory purchase unless there is a viable development plan in place and they've got an identified group that would be willing to take it on.
So out of all that and all the comments coming down the side, and there's definite interest in our town to save the buildings, and we don't want to be looking back thinking that should have been saved. So what can we as a community do about it?
Yeah. So I have been thinking about this. Like I think what's really needed is a sort of action group or a building preservation group. There's trusts like Glasgow Building Preservation Trust, which works on projects such as this. Obviously, Glasgow is a much larger kettle of fish. It's they're 10 times bigger than Paisley in terms of like the buildings that they have to look after and stuff. So it's difficult, but I would say that there is power in this community to come together and actually try and do something about this. I think the council have failed in some places. Like they should be serving repairs notices on this owner, because from my point of view, it seems that he's not interested in keeping this building in a good state. And year on year, the building's becoming more and more expensive to repair. So there's going to be a point where it's just not viable.
Just kind of agitate the owner into action. Just continue to fine him. I mean, the Council of Devine, £400 is the biggest fine available to the council, believe it or not. Which I guess is, and I think it's really important. As part of this program, in this show, we always want to make sure that people, know the facts, because it's very easy for people to go out and print something up or type something up to say, the council should do this, the council should do that. But the reality is, and it's important to talk about it, the council are relatively restricted in the powers that they have and the capability that they've got. And as you say, unless there's a viable back-end plan for development of that building, which could take multiple millions, if not tens, then the council were reluctant to push the nuclear button and pull that building back. So, but as a community, surely we must be able to do something. Good comment in there from Piero. Paisley Development Trust got help from the council in saving the Russell Institute.
Absolutely.
And that's a really good example.
Yeah,
I was just thinking there and going to think out loud. I mean, Paisley Community Trust is pretty mature now in our governance. And Cameron, you're interested in this subject, not putting you in the spot just now. Is there a place for Paisley Community Trust to gather interested parties round maybe somebody like you to champion that cause?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the sort of regulations and stuff are around this. I think I don't think there's anything too formal, so there's no reason that we can't do something like that. I think I would encourage people, if they are interested in becoming actively involved, to get in touch with Paisley Community Trust. And we can look at ideas. I think what we need to do is come up with some viable development. Usually that would involve commissioning a company to carry out a survey of the building. And to come up with some proposals. So that would be a great first stage. I mean, the council are very, very restricted in the money they can spend on things like this. The resources are very, very limited. So for them, if we're able to provide something like that, that would be a tremendous help. So there's a lot of work that can be done in conjunction with the council as well, and trying to take off a bit of the workload from them.
Yeah, well,
I was also thinking, Cameron, about mutual benefit. If you have distant landlords and distant owners, that the perception is that they're letting things go to rack and ruin. But if they were given a community joint venture incentive to do something about it, so that's a nice way of saying let's work together to try and make the buildings better without going to compulsory purchase order sanction or even further.
Yeah, I think it's important not to alienate the owners in these situations, because ultimately they're the ones that hold the power, and we're sort of begging them. It is a very difficult situation, and I mean it's the reason that a lot of buildings in Paisley have been lost, because there's been an absentee owner, and there's not been very much that can be done as a result of that. There's I think there's something missing in the legislation, to be honest, that prevents these buildings from being protected.
Yeah, we've got to. I think it's incumbent on the community, the people of Paisley, to try and do something, work with the council, using the powers that they have, looking at how we can strategically, put proposals in place to ensure that these buildings don't fall into the disrepair and ultimately get reused. There's a big push on, we need more housing in Paisley. Housing gets mentioned so many times. Think of the housing opportunity that could go into the REI. I know it will be very expensive, and it's probably not at the price point that maybe the housing needs to be at, but there's other things that could be done. And I guess, Frank, when you're walking around town and you're looking at the listed buildings that we've got, Frank, it's you'll see some that are in great shape. So this image you sent in earlier on, which is a much more modern hospital in Paisley, very much in the Art Deco style, but that was renovated and is being renovated by care homes. But you'll see, other buildings that have got fantastic historical connection that I guess you don't want to see going to rack and ruin. The John Neilston was boarded up for a number of years and is now, I think it's flats in there, isn't it?
It's flats. It's all flats. They open up every year for the Paisley Doors Open Day, and I think they've done a very good conversion of that. I think the one before, the Hawkhead Hospital one, to me is probably a prime example. I was speaking to somebody about that. There's that building, particularly the one with the curved ends. I think is wards 7 and 8 is A listed. The rest of the site is effectively B listed. But there's one building that is still to be refurbished, and I think that's the nurses' quarters on the sort of the upper end of the site. Yeah, and that just seems to be sort of lying derelict. And I'm not up on the rules and regulations, but I think there was certain funding available to care homes to actually refurbish the first chunk of buildings
Yeah.
that has been changed, and the scope of that funding is not quite the same now, and make it as viable as it was to convert, which I think is the nurses' quarters.
Yeah.
On the top end of that site. So I think, there's a lot that can be done, and I think Rockhead Hospital is probably a very good example of it being done quite kindly to the original structures, but making them usable homes. I think the tiles in the walls, for instance, were a fantastic idea, sort of replicating the hospital buildings themselves at the times, and keeping the structure and the sizes and the shapes of the buildings. That's made a big difference.
No, it's been a really hugely successful project, and making sure you've got that developer in there that's willing to take the punt. But comment in there from Councillor Devine there, and Gary, this is to you. What you were mentioning there, Gary. In terms of how do we, galvanise support, but Scottish Parliament, should give it to the council to tackle this problem. What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, well, I know we were chatting about this the other day as well, Andy, and there seems to be things falling in between the cracks. It may be incumbent on the community to take this up and to try and broker and smooth it over the cracks, and making sure that where the power lies, it lies with purpose, so that we can do something about it. Not to embarrass owners, but to empower owners to bring the buildings back into use.
Yeah.
That's an important thing, because it's very easy to alienate an owner. If you approach it with frustration and negativity, then they're not going to react well, and they'll just walk away. And then you're in a worse situation then.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Cameron, in your lockdown walks, have you made a note of the buildings that you're concerned about, and that could form the basis of a list that a group could get behind you with?
Yeah, I mean, there's I've got a whole load of buildings listed. I mean, there's a website. It's called the Buildings at Risk Register, and that lists all the official buildings, or all the buildings on the official list. There are some buildings that aren't on that list because of this list is maintained by volunteers. It tends to only be updated on a sort of annual basis. But I did start a Facebook page in March. I've not been particularly active on it in the last few months because I've tried to take a break from Facebook. But on that page, I've tried to highlight a lot of the buildings that are at risk in the town, and also explain their history. So I sort of go through the development history of them, and try to explain the best way I can why the buildings are like this. Because a lot of the time, you see people posting pictures of, say, the REI in Facebook groups, and then every comment almost is like, "Oh, the council should be doing something about this. The council shouldn't be doing something about this." But I feel that if you actually explain the situation to people, they have a much better understanding. And you don't want to alienate the community from the council as well. The council are doing a fantastic job, like they have done with so many buildings in the town. I do think that there are improvements still to be made, but I think that's for us to sort of encourage that and provide a wee bit of pressure.
Yeah, well, listen, it's something that we all need to get behind. Cameron, I appreciate you mentioned that you're getting kicked out your room at 9 o'clock. So
I've not been kicked out yet, but
we're going to start winding up. But before we do, I mean, gents, we could talk all night, and you both sent me through a whole batch of pictures. But just before we do start winding up, Frank, tell us a little bit about your book, because some people might want to purchase the listed buildings book, because you're going to be printing a small run of these. Is that correct?
Well, I'm going to print to order. Effectively, they're not cheap to produce, and unfortunately, because they're very short, I wasn't expecting to be printing many. They come in at quite a price. So they come in about £100. As I say, it covers the 200 plus buildings of A and B within the town. It's been about 6 or 7 months worth of work, and going back and back a number of times to get better pictures, especially the private houses. Found some of the private houses I got better shots of at the in the autumn rather than the spring.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a book that I will print to order. It can get made in a week to 10 days.
Aye.
And you can get me through my Facebook page at Frank Stain. Photography is my nomer, because I've come from the printing industry.
Say that again. We can catch it.
Tag. It's Frank Stain.
Frank Stain. We'll need to. I'll try and dig it out and get it up on the screen. But I was just going to say, Frank, that that book, when you look at that book, that is just such a tremendous record of all of the wonderful listed buildings that we have in town, and something that we should be so proud of. And what I would like to see happen, Frank, is that the council give you a large order of those books. I'd like to see them ordering 20, 30, 40 of those books that they use to send out to people to say, look at Paisley. Cameron, you mentioned the developer days. Look at Paisley. These are the listed buildings. These are the ones that are in need of investment. Look at how beautiful this town is, and why don't you engage with the council and with the community to talk about how you can play your part in making Paisley, the place that it needs to be and wants to be and can be. So I would love to see the council, and I know we've got some folk from the council listening in. I'd love to see the council getting straight on to you, Frank, and ordering a batch of these books and sending them out so that we can be proud of that. That would be fantastic if that could happen, Frank.
Well, I'm sure I could get it organised. And I say the original concept of this was to keep me busy in my retirement for a wee while. It's not been as long as I would have anticipated it would have taken, but I've really enjoyed doing it, and it's opened my eyes to a number of things. A bit like Cameron, you see buildings that you'd love to see getting refurbished. I think one that we haven't talked about tonight is the old fire station. I think the fact that has been worked on, but it seems to have sort of ground to a halt, is a fantastic achievement of whoever's done it. So,
yeah,
great message.
Great to have you both championing the town, and there's the Provost, Lorraine Cameron, on saying beautiful publication. Well done, Frank, and thanks to both for loving your town and trying to protect it. And that goes from us. I think it's great that what you two guys are doing and championing. And maybe when lockdown's over,
I don't want to take all the credit. I think it's worth mentioning that there's so many fantastic groups and people in Paisley that do champion the town. Obviously, I kind of come at it from just an architectural point of view, but the community groups, everything, that's what makes Paisley. So it's why I've decided to stick around. I could have went off somewhere else after uni and lived somewhere else, but I thought, I think I'll stick around for a wee bit.
Stay in Paisley, roll your sleeves up and work with the community groups that are out there. Gents, to both of you, thank you so much indeed for your time on the programme tonight. It's been great to have you on the show, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. It is a really vital subject to Paisley, that we look after these historical architectural gems, and we don't let any, we've got to draw a line. Not one of these buildings need to be lost from now on. We just cannot stand for it. And the community needs to take that line. We work with the council. We work with the distant landlords or the distant owners if we can find them. And we can try and salvage and refurbish and rebuild our town. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Brilliant, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks,
guys.
for coming on.
Much appreciated.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for now.
Right. Cheers.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye now. Oh, fantastic.
Andy, it's true. We could talk all night about Paisley buildings, and you only need to walk from one end to the other.
Yep.
And look up.
Yep.
And sometimes looking down at some of the wee nuances of architecture that we have, and then round the corner, we've got a fascinating town. Any time that I've brought anyone to the town as visitors or that come for gigs, I remember I was fortunate enough to promote having 17 at Paisley Town Hall, Andy.
Yeah.
And the guys came in, they flew in Glasgow Airport, and we drove them to the town hall, and the first words when they opened those doors inside the town hall wow, is this where our gig is? And they all walked up the town. I think they went to Marks and Sparks and got their sandwiches and came back. What a wonderful town you guys have got.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is first impressions of Paisley.
Yeah, absolutely. And it infuriates me when I see people talking Paisley down on Facebook, you know, and Paisley's a dump, Paisley's a, you know, a bleak hole, and you just think, just take it. It needs effort, it needs work, it needs us all pulling together to be proud of the place. You know, the very least you can do is say nothing. Don't put it down. The very most you can do just.
Last week, Andy, were we talking last week about change and change being inevitable and let's embrace it? Because we were talking about Arcadia Group, Buttons.
Yeah.
Change is coming, Andy. We know it.
Oh, aye.
Let's waking up and embrace that change.
Absolutely.
And those things aren't as good as they could be. Let's galvanise the community support behind guys like Cameron and Frank, and let's make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. You were talking about having 17 coming in and playing in the town hall. One of the images that we never got to show earlier on, but Cameron sent it through to me. I have never seen this image before, so I have no idea. I'll need to ask Cameron where he got this image from. I don't know if you've seen this image before, Gary, but this was amazing, and it is a picture of one of the early concepts of Paisley Town Hall. Have you seen this one?
What one?
This one.
I think I have, Andy.
I've never seen that before.
And I'm so pleased that we've got what we've got, actually.
Yeah.
I seen an image today. I don't know if you were on, there was a Paisley Facebook thing.
Right.
Today showed you almost like postcard images of Paisley, and there was one when the Abbey was derelict.
Right.
You couldn't see behind the town hall, and you could see the river, and you could see the bridge and just the river to the left hand side. It was almost one of those really, really clean, crisp images.
Yeah.
And the town hall just looked magnificent.
Well, I must admit, this one here that's up on the screen right now, you know, it's quite kind of, I don't know what the description of the architecture would be, kind of Gothic perhaps, but, you know, it does tie in with the town hall. But I think what we've got there on the site, I actually prefer, to be quite honest. I think it's a much more statement piece of architecture, what we have. But you can see the old jail in there. And then this was another image that he sent me through. And I know you'll like this particular image, Gary, because it's what's that ghost that you keep talking about, Gary?
The spirit of Paisley future.
Aye. Well, this is... Well, it is. Look at this, Gary.
Oh, there's the spirit there. That's Paisley Pier. Remember Paisley Pier?
Paisley Pier. Well, it's far too old for me, Gary. Come on.
Looking towards of course, that's the railway, Walnuke Church on the right-hand side.
In the background.
The theatre's probably just round about where that scaffolding is, Andy, just out of shot, probably Paisley Theatre.
So and obviously, that's the jail on the left, isn't it, that will get bulldozed, and the piazza currently sits on top of that.
It sits on top of Paisley's spirit of Paisley's future, which is still there, Andy, and is itching to get out.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I didn't like that town hall image, Andy.
What's that?
I didn't like that town hall image. I thought it was too busy.
Oh, the old town hall? Oh, the concept sketch?
Yeah, far too busy for me.
Yeah, it was too much. It was too much because it actually detracted from Paisley Abbey, which is a beautiful building in its own right. And it was almost over-engineering or over-designing the building to kind of replicate parts of the Abbey in some way, but too busy. The one that we've got is a much more graceful
it's very nice
piece of architecture.
I think Eddie's got it spot on, Andy.
Yeah. Eddie's given the concept the thumbs down.
Thumbs down.
Yeah, but
I've been fortunate enough, Andy, to be in and around some of the nooks and crannies of the town hall, and some of the wee quirky bits are really interesting.
Yeah, well, there you go. That was the actual design that was selected, but the Clark family hated it.
Imagine that. But good judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I must admit, the main sort of clock tower part does kind of. I need to look at a picture of it, but it does look like the main kind of clock tower in Renfrew town centre.
Yeah.
You know,
it chimes with that, Andy. Am I getting worse?
The jokes have just been cheesy, Gary. It's getting to Christmas cracker joke time. That's what's kind of going on there.
I write them.
You probably do. Piero's off.
Piero's off.
Time for MasterChef. Oh my goodness, we're competing with MasterChef in the Pericini household.
That's not bad. That guy that was in Aha's going to win it.
Who?
I don't think there is a guy in Aha that's in it, but I think there's a Dutch guy on MasterChef now, Andy. Some of the stuff he's producing is stunning.
Oh, I need to get down and watch it. Well, listen, it's been another fantastic show tonight. Both Frank and Cameron, they're still in the green room, so if they can hold on for a few moments, we're just about to wrap, and we'll chat to them afterwards, or the black and white room, sorry, Gary. A fantastic show, really, really interested. Hopefully we kind of take encouragement that there are people out there who want to see our jewels in the crown return to their former glory, and that's what we need to be focusing on. Knowing that the council don't have a magic wand, knowing that we've got to roll up our sleeves and see what we can do to help out. Brilliant show, Gary.
Andy, there's a lot to do, and I think one of the things we're conscious of is being representative of the community and being a membership organisation. Maybe in the new year we should ask some big questions, Andy.
I think that would be a good idea. Big questions from you, the community, everyone that tunes in, everyone on our Facebook pages. Some key questions about Paisley and what you would like. You know, it's taking the temperature. Would you like this? Would you like that? How would you like to see this happen? That could be a really valuable use. And of course, community power is the way ahead, Gary.
Yeah, and if we can get subgroups behind guys like Cameron's sitting there with his listed buildings or his buildings in danger, and he's got a very good manner and approach. I mean that
switched on.
That having leadership there to say, look, you've got to be careful with the owner.
Yep,
is really spot on, and having somebody like that leading this with other people and like-minded people round about him, then we've got a chance, Andy, and at least we've got to give it a go. But so that might be one of the big questions. There might be some other things that the community come forward and say, "Oh, what about this?"
Yeah,
and then maybe we'll have a top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, opinions are great, views, ideas, concepts, but the one thing, Gary, that's going to make a change is action.
Absolutely, Andy.
Action. People need to get involved with the community groups out there, whether it's Paisley Community Trust or some of the other ones that were mentioned and have been mentioned, and do a wee bit. See if it's an hour a week, 1 hour of your time, your expertise and your effort and your energy. That's going to make a huge, a huge difference to the town. Let's be the generation in this town that doesn't let another one of those buildings fall. We've got it within our capability.
As you know, what we get inspirational guests on here, and every week there's a guest or guests that are doing something extraordinary in the community. There's just this week, the Renfrewshire Christmas Toy Bank has closed its doors for receipts.
Yep.
What they do at the Renfrewshire Christmas Toy Bank is over and above the call of duty.
Oh yeah.
But see, once you're doing it, like Andy, once you're doing it and you're in and you're doing it, it becomes part of your life. It becomes part of what you do. So anyone who's commented tonight that's passionate about Paisley, the buildings in Paisley, or any topic, get in touch with us, join Paisley Community Trust, and join with some of the initiatives like what we've spoken about this evening.
Absolutely. Make 2021's New Year resolution the year that you decide that you're going to get involved, you're going to take action, you're going to work with the community groups. And there's Graham, a brilliant comment to bring up onto the screen. Talking positively about Paisley can make a huge difference. You know, even if it's just that, if you see someone talking Paisley down on Facebook, face them up. You know, it's not a bad place. It's a great place. You know, look above the street. Sure, this is not about being ignorant to the challenges that we have, Gary. because Paisley's got its challenges.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah,
but it's about being positive.
Eddie Devine is spot on again. We need to stop walking by. Don't walk by. Put your hand up. If you can give a bit of time, give your time. There's plenty of people on here. We can share the burden. We'll make our town better.
Yeah, absolutely. Believe in ourselves. It's the way to go. Fantastic. Well, Gary, I'm absolutely super motivated. We've had brilliant speakers on. We've had passionate engagement from everyone that's tuned in to watch us on YouTube or Facebook. Great to see you all. Tonight's show is done. We're looking towards next week. Gary, what have you got lined up for next week?
I am hoping, I think no matter what we do next week, Andy, we've got to have a panel special.
Oh, yes, we do.
We've got Is that the wrong one?
I never said it was behind you, Gary. You went a week too early.
Oh no, we haven't.
Oh yes, we do. Tell us all. I'm going to get stuck in a loop, Gary. Tell us all about next week, Gary.
We'll try our best to bring a panel special. And we had Countdown to Christmas the other week there, which was a brilliant show. Last week's was fantastic, talking up Paisley literature. A couple of ideas for Christmas presents potentially. Next week, let's go for it. Let's have a panto special, Andy.
A panto special. So, folks, tune in. That's going to be the 16th of December. It's the big run-up. It's only a couple of weeks to Christmas after that. And, you know, if you were planning to watch MasterChef at 9 o'clock, just record it. You know, we go live. It's going to be a super special next week with panto as the main theme.
Yeah, let's do that.
Gary, we're all done tonight.
Yeah, that was great, Andy. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for hosting as usual and pressing the buttons.
No bother at all. And Gary, good to see you've settled into your man shed and your bug hut, and all the sound and audio is working just well. But good show tonight, Gary. Everyone, go on.
Looking forward to the lights of choice next week. See you all next week. That was brilliant. Good night.
See you later, folks. Thanks again.